They disappeared from a small yard one spring morning, and everything that followed has been a tangle of facts, questions, and heartbreak. If you want to keep up with every verified update about Lily and Jack and help keep this search in the light, hit subscribe now and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single development. Every new pair of eyes helps. On May 2nd, 2025, 6-year-old Lily, often spelled Lily in news reports, and 4-year-old Jack Sullivan were reported missing from their home in Lansdowne Station, a quiet, heavily wooded part of Pictou County, Nova Scotia. That short sentence masks how complicated and unnerving the next weeks became. An immediate grid search across rough terrain, hundreds of volunteers and dozens of trained searchers combing woods, streams, and old mines, helicopters and drones scanning tree lines, an RCMP major crimes team methodically collecting digital records, bank transactions, and video footage, and a community holding dozens of candlelit vigils while asking the same terrible question: where are the children? What stands out first is how little there has been to lock onto. Investigators found no signs of forced entry at the trailer where the family lived. There were no clear signs of a violent struggle. Those two facts, the lack of obvious trauma at the property and the absence of an immediate, traceable trail, left police with a puzzle that looks both simple and impossible. 2 young children vanished from a small, fenced yard without clear witnesses or immediate clues. When disappearance happens in dense woodland rather than in public space, investigators must work faster and more intelligently because nature itself obscures, buries, and degrades the smallest traces. That is why the early hours and days in cases like this are so crucial, and also why, when those hours yield little, the anxiety of a community multiplies. The timeline is the backbone of every missing persons inquiry, and here the timeline has been a source of confusion and tension. Public reporting and court documents show the children were last seen on May 1st in public with family members. Surveillance footage places them at a Dollarama in New Glasgow at 2:25 p.m. on that day. The next morning, at 10:01 a.m., a 911 call was placed reporting them missing. From that moment, police began assembling records and looking for concrete time anchors, bank withdrawals, phone pings, dashcam video, and footage from toll booths along the Trans-Canada Highway. Those objective data points are the only way to verify accounts when recollection naturally fracturing in stress and sleep-deprived confusion. Early reporting suggested the children had been kept home from school because of illness on May 1st, a detail later complicated by eyewitness accounts and the surveillance sighting. Small differences in statements about bedtimes. One time reported as 9 p.m., another later revised to 10 p.m., are not unusual in traumatic circumstances. Human memory is unreliable when people have been exhausted or terrified. But investigators must draw a hard line between the natural fuzziness of memory and the inconsistencies that matter, because every minute missing from an accurate timeline shrinks the window of viable leads. That uncertainty sent RCMP into an expansive, multi-layered response. Within hours and then days, search teams mounted what investigators called an extensive grid sweep across roughly 8.5 square kilometers of challenging terrain. That meant field teams walking line after line through thick underbrush and fallen timber, dogs searching scent lanes, drones peering down from above, and helicopters taking broad overviews. Volunteers and family members joined trained search and rescue crews. Entire communities did what they could to look in every ditch and pond and culvert. In the long run, that physical search turned up a few small traces that became focal pieces of evidence: a pink blanket that relatives said belonged to one of the children, and an isolated child-sized boot print on a pipeline trail. Both items were seized and sent for forensic testing. In a case otherwise light on physical clues, even these small items can be vital, but they require careful lab work and corroboration, and that takes time. At the same time as boots and hounds were working the ground, investigators pursued a digital and documentary trail that mirrors how much of modern life can be read like breadcrumb evidence. The RCMP secured judicial orders to access phone data, GPS logs, app records, and bank transactions tied to the adults in the home for the period surrounding the disappearance. Those legal steps are standard but important. Call logs and metadata can show who is in contact with whom. Phone tower pings can place devices in space and time, and banking activity can establish movement patterns when matched to receipts or gas station cameras. In this case, courts approved roughly a dozen record access orders. The public filings that later emerged were redacted in places for privacy and investigative reasons, but they made visible the scope of the inquiry. Police were checking every practical source of objective information. Polygraph tests and interviews were also part of that process. Several family members and associates voluntarily underwent polygraph examinations. The court filings show some of those tests returned results investigators took as consistent with the subject's statements. Polygraphs do not prove much on their own, and investigators know their limits, but they can be used as a tool to help direct follow-up questioning or to exclude certain lines of inquiry. Meanwhile, RCMP continued formal interviews, noting in public statements that the Major Crime Unit was leading an investigation under the Missing Persons Act while keeping all possibilities on the table. That phrasing is important. Police refused to declare the case criminal without sufficient grounds, while also not ruling anything out as they continued to gather evidence. From the start, multiple theories were being considered. The simplest is that two small children wandered from their yard into dense forest and could not be found, a heartbreaking scenario that search teams always hope to exclude quickly because the odds of an unmapped, undetected survival drop fast in rugged, wooded terrain. Another possibility investigators weighed is abduction, an intentional removal of the children by another person. But the lack of obvious forced entry and the absence of witnesses complicate that line of thinking. It raises questions about opportunity and motive that investigators must prove rather than assume. A third, painful theory is the possibility of undisclosed or internal family involvement, which police must investigate with sensitivity and evidence-based steps because accusing family members without cause is both unjust and legally dangerous. That is why investigators took care to capture every objective data point they could: cameras, bank and app logs, timeline C. Despite weeks and months of searching, detailed video analysis, and hundreds of interviews, there has been no confirmed sighting of Lily or Jack since the public footage from May 1st. The RCMP has processed and prioritized thousands of video files and followed up on hundreds of tips. Many have been ruled out, others remain under review. Investigators have emphasized that the work is painstaking, matching a single detail from a tip to a time-stamped video clip, or aligning a banking transaction to a GPS ping, takes time and careful cross-referencing. Evidence that seems promising at first glance can dissolve under scrutiny. A vehicle sighting that matches a description but not a precise timestamp, or a phone ping that appears to place someone in an area only because of how cell towers route signals. That is the frustrating, expensive, and necessary part of thorough police work. The community response has been tireless. Volunteers have organized repeated ground searches, candlelight vigils, and fundraising events. Families, neighbors, and complete strangers have driven to the region to hand out flyers, help skin pipelines and creek banks, or simply to stand with the family in public displays of support. This level of grassroots involvement shows both the sorrow and solidarity of a small place under strain. People do what they can because doing nothing feels worse than holding hope, slim though it may be. That community energy also translates into practical help for investigators. The more people looking, the higher the chance someone sees something others missed and reports it through the correct channels. At the same time, that attention has exacted a toll. The family, often thrust into the spotlight at a time when privacy and space are most needed, has had to navigate intrusive speculation, conspiracy, and sometimes vilification online. Investigators and family advocates have asked for respectful space to allow for methodical work and for the family's grief. This is a delicate balance. Public involvement has been essential, but it must be channeled in ways that assist, not hinder, investigative procedures. So, where does that leave the case now? The RCMP's most recent court documents and public statements make several things clear. First, the investigation remains very active. Officers continue to use every available resource: forensic labs, digital records, video analysis, canine units, and targeted ground searches. Second, As of the mid-July public filings, investigators had not classified the case as definitively criminal. Their posture was to explore all scenarios while continuing to build evidence and check leads. Third, key physical items, the pink blanket and the child-sized boot print, have been sent for forensic examination and are treated as important pieces of an otherwise lean evidentiary picture. Fourth, the sheer number of videos and tips means the RCMP must prioritize carefully. The volume of material is itself a logistical challenge that slows, but does not stop progress. The human weight of the unknown remains enormous. For the family, every day is a measure of grief and hope in equal parts. For the volunteers who have walked the woods and the officers who have reviewed hours of video, there is a professional and personal urgency to find these children. For the community, the missing children case has been a mirror reflecting collective fears and the wish that every small piece of the puzzle will finally fall into place. What can the public do that is actually useful? First, hold on to whatever you have seen and make sure it reaches investigators through the official tip lines. A dashcam clip, an old copied security video, a memory of a vehicle or a person, even something you thought was too small. Those are the kinds of details the RCMP has repeatedly asked people to hand over. Second, avoid amplifying unverified claims on social media. Speculation can create noise that makes it harder for meaningful information to be picked out. Third, support the family in humane ways and respect their need for privacy as they handle unimaginable loss. This remains an active, heart-wrenching mystery. The evidence gathered so far, the physical traces, the video footage, the bank and phone records, the interviews and polygraphs, is substantial in volume but thin in decisive answers. The investigation is playing out at the intersection of modern forensics and old-fashioned investigative legwork. Every phone ping, transaction receipt, and video frame must be matched to human accounts that can be incomplete or confused. That is why the RCMP continues to ask for patience even as the public presses for results. In many cases, the truth arrives not as a single dramatic document, but as a series of small verifications that together build a final picture, and that is the arc the investigators are working toward. If you have anything to share, even something you think is trivial, give it to the investigators. If you want to follow verified developments, subscribe and hit the bell so you're notified when new, confirmed information is released. Above all, remember that this is a human story. 2 young lives are at stake and a family is living in a world of terrible uncertainty. Every careful tip, every preserved video, every verified lead matters. The search goes on, and the hope for answers has not dimmed.